We're born into our names, but we become family by heart. I'm Dustin Gruss, public speaker and family transition coach. When my wife and I found out in the beginning of 2016 that we weren't going to be able to have our own biological children just 7 months into our marriage, we were shook. Little did we know what lied ahead through our journey of infertility, foster care, and where we are now, having recently adopted our two beautiful boys. What we do know is every little bit of help we got along the way was priceless. And that's what we can expect with this podcast. Stories of inspiration and resources to lead you through that journey. From the heartbreak of infertility to the hope and blessings that come with foster care and adoption. We may have different stories, backgrounds, and names, but we're all family here. This is Family by Heart. What's going on, family? Welcome to another episode of Family by Heart podcast. I'm excited for my guest today. She is a foster parent turned adoptive parent turned foster parent coach and podcaster and author with a book coming out very soon. I'm very excited to have of Impressing Minds, Kristen Adkins. Kristen, welcome. Thank you so much for being here and joining me on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. It's an honor. This is actually the first podcast where I've been interviewed. I usually
well, all right.
interviewing, and so thank you.
Well, thank you. And we actually kind of got introduced pretty much through social media, us kind of both commenting on other people's graphics and whatnot and their content. And once I read took a look at your page and everything, I'm like, I should reach out to her, see how the coaching is going, and we'll definitely get into that. But definitely there was a lot of similarities for the both of us, and so I'm excited to get into those and just kind of see what it is that you're doing for the foster community, because it seems like a lot, especially based on your history, reading your bio and your webpage and everything. So before we get into that, a little bit of a icebreaker. I like to ask my guests this season, what is something that your clients, readers, or listeners would be surprised to know about you? It's kind of a fun fact, something we wouldn't know about you otherwise.
I have 3 American bullies.
Okay.
And they've had pups, and we've had as many as 14 puppies at our house,
wow.
14 dogs at our house at one time. So,
Wow.
yeah. So
You
we
must
breed
have a
dogs.
pretty big house for having that many dogs and the number of foster kids and kids you've adopted and everything. So,
Yeah.
but 3 bullies, that's awesome. I've never had a bulldog. I've had different dogs over the years myself, but one that certainly changed our life is the one we have now, and that's our Eva. She's a boxer hound mix, and we got her when my wife and I were kind of in the acceptance stage of, we're not gonna be able to have our own kids. Maybe it's just gonna be just us. And then we got her, and that kind of opened everything back up for us. So dogs are such a huge part of our lives. So it's awesome to hear that you've had the dogs in the family and they've had bigger families. So cool.
Right.
So obviously the big question here with what you do, how did you get into fostering? And as mentioned, you were a foster parent turned adoptive parent. Did you set out to foster only, or was adoption a part of the plan when you got into it as well?
Well, it's actually both. So the first time we got into it, it was specifically to adopt. And I think the culture or whatever kind of looks down on that at this point in time or recently. It's more like fostering is the only option that you have, but we only wanted to just adopt. So the kids' rights were terminated, and the social worker called us. We were on some kind of list, and she called us for 2 children. So that was our first experience with foster care. A
Mm,
year and a half later, we actually adopted them. So they were there for a year and a half before actual adoption occurred. And we had to take a long time to settle in with them before we felt an inkling or a call to do some more. The reason we got into it the second time was just because a friend of mine wanted us to do respite care for her. And
mm,
so we were like, okay, yeah, we can do that. And so we redid our fingerprints and updated our license and all that. And so we actually did that respite, but we also got calls because we were on the foster list now for additional foster kids.
mm,
We had 24 kids over that 10-year period. And so when the last call that we got, we had 3 girls. And so my husband, he said, we're not adopting again. And I said, oh, okay. And one day I've been praying. I was like, oh God, I love these. Because one I got from the hospital. Like these were little kids. The
mm,
last one I got from the hospital. And I said, Lord, if you want us to adopt, you'll have to talk to my husband. You'll have to put it on his heart and give him that nudge that we want to adopt, because I do, but I don't want to be contentious or whatever. And one day, the oldest of those 3 came to me and said, I'm done with my chores. Is there anything else you want me to do? And I was like, no, I think you're good. And she scampered off. And my husband was sitting there watching. He was like, I don't think we could ever let these girls go if they come up for adoption. And I was like, really? And so once those 3 were officially adopted, the other set of siblings moved out and we closed our home because
mm.
we had too many kids. We were over the limit already.
Yeah.
So that's how it's started and ended, kind of.
So, and just kind of circle back to like the fact that you guys planned on adoption all along and stuff.
Mhm.
What was that conversation like with you and your husband? Who, like, did one of you approach the other about going through foster adoption, and what was that conversation like? Because certainly, as you came around to the 3 girls, I think it's obviously very important that both sides of the family are on board, like both sides of the couple are on board with
Mhm.
both fostering and adopting. And then also, I guess this is a longer winded question, but the kids that you had already adopted, the first 2, they were
Mhm.
probably older at that point since you had fostered over the course of 10 years.
Mhm.
What was that conversation like with them when he said, we're going to adopt the 3 girls?
Yeah. So originally, I'm not sure what, the only thing I could say is like maybe God just put a little hole in our heart. We had 2 biological children, and they were both 2 girls. So we were just wanting to add to our family without going through pregnancy, actually.
Hmm.
So that just kind of led the conversation of, I think we're ready to do this a different way, and, expand our family a different way this time. And also, we had grown up in a church where an older couple, I mean, they weren't really old. I guess they felt like they were old to me at the time because I was a child, but they did foster care. And so they would come and bring like 6, 7, 8 kids with them.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and so we grew up kind of watching that family. And I always thought maybe someday I want to do that. So
Mm,
we just kind of had some natural conversations all along. It wasn't like I wanted to do it and I was trying to convince him to do it. He and I
yeah.
both just had that little tug at our heart.
Hmm.
And then the other thing was when we wanted to adopt the little girls, we had pretty much said, we're not adopting any more children. He'd let several children go to other families, back to, they had to go back to their biological family. But we just kind of said, what if they come up for adoption? Would you all be, willing to share your room, share everything,
Mm.
forever, practically? And oh yeah, they were very excited, and especially because the baby, I mean, like they had really bonded with her, and so she was probably about a year old at that time.
Mm.
So it's just very like exciting, and I mean, we love them from the very beginning. So it
Mm.
was kind of a relief, I think, for them too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So 24 kids over the course of 10 years. Um, for someone that's considering getting into foster care, what's probably one thing that you think that they should know ahead of time getting into foster care? Like the biggest thing, because with that 24 kids, my wife and I, our two boys were our second and third placement, basically, even though they're brothers. Um, we experienced heartbreak with the first ones going home, even though it was more melancholy because they went back to bio family. But so that there's obviously the ups and downs. But what's maybe the a big thing that sticks out in your head that um, people considering foster care should take heed with before they get
Mhm.
into really go through all the classes and everything that comes with foster care.
Yeah, I would say having a comfortable, stable marriage
Mm.
beforehand, because it's very taxing, physically, it's very taxing emotionally and mentally. And so if you're not 100% sure about your marriage and have a plan to go forward with, like, we're going to spend time to ourselves and, maybe go out on a date or whatever once a month or something. Um, that would be the biggest thing, because it is taxing, and then it takes a
Hmm.
toll on your marriage, um, because you're just so busy, and you're almost, as a mom, you're so consumed with the kids and the case and the what ifs that it can make you almost obsessed with it. And so you're not wanting to work on the other things of your life, like marriage. So I would say a strong marriage would be the number one thing before you even approach the possibility.
And how about the relationship? How it affected your relationship with your biological kids, having foster kids come into the home, and how
Mm.
that whole dynamic worked.
I think they were really excited because in our situation, we decided to do only younger children than our youngest. And so it was always like, little kids were coming to play, and they could dress them up, and they could, dote around after them and play with them. And so they were really excited and on board, and I think it made them feel mature and like they were needed, um, a lot more than just being more self centered as a child. I think they
Hmm.
had to sacrifice a lot.
Yeah.
So our relationship with them is very important as well.
Hmm.
Looking back, I probably would have had those like little play dates with them alone, you know,
Mm.
like taking them out special, um, just like I would have or we did with our marriage, purposefully worked on that. So you purposefully work on the kid, your firstborn kids, the first and second, actually, on that relationship, and to get them out of the house with you alone and process
Hmm.
things that are going on, like court cases, possibilities. What if this happens? They have to go back, and that grief that comes with
Yeah.
it, help them process that a little more purposefully.
And that's another one. How did the your biological children handle the grief as they saw these different kids come in the house? establish relationships and friendships with them and then see them leave? Like,
Mhm.
um, is there some things that surprised you with how your biological children reacted, and then also your two adopted children, how they reacted? Your first two adopted, I should say, once the others left.
Yeah, I would say the older ones would, the biological ones would probably more or less grieve, and the adopted ones, um, almost one of them was almost kind of triggered, I think, about
Mm-hmm.
it, and so we had some bigger issues that came up with that one child, and
Mm-hmm.
that may have triggered some issues.
Mm.
Um, but for the most part, they would just grieve, and then we could kind of move on and take a break. I actually had one set of siblings that my girls, the second and third girl, were actually kind of excited that they left just because they didn't get along. Like
Mm.
it was constant girl fighting and territorial, and so they were almost relieved when that sibling group left. Um, but it was just childish things, it wasn't like
Yeah.
they didn't like them, but it was kind of like just childish girl drama kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Um,
yeah.
what was the longest placement you had that either returned home or moved on to another placement, moved to another foster home?
Yeah, the longest placement we had was over 2 years.
Oh wow.
And yeah. And they were like, there were two boys. They were boys, of course. So they were,
Mm-hmm.
hyper or whatever. And
I
um,
resemble that.
yeah, I'm sure. And so after a while, like they were still having visits ever so often. And um, they, I think they were just in limbo. They just didn't really want to bond with us because they wanted to go home.
Mm.
And so it was a difficult time. But I really love them and like, would kiss them goodnight every night and try to play mom. But I know they really, um, they were just really confused, I think, about why am I still
Mm.
here when they could go and visit with their parents. There was no really explanation for them that was a solid explanation or a timeline that they could follow. So that was really hard. But
Yeah.
eventually they did go back with their bio dad.
Mm.
Um, after 2 years, they had like maybe one overnight visit or something. And then it was like, okay, they're back. They're going back.
Mm.
So that was actually kind of shocking at the time, even though we kind of
Mm-hmm.
expected it.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Um, and where, forgive me again, where are you located? Like state and citywide? Like,
Yeah. Well, we're in southern West Virginia.
okay.
Hmm.
Okay. All right. And it how has, because you have a little bit of a twang. I'll say that. I don't know. People
Okay.
tell you. To me, you do. I mean,
All right.
but just a little bit, like hint of one. Um,
Yeah.
are any of your um are any of your kids another race, another? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And how has that experience been as you've gone out in public? Because again, I
Mhm.
asked that question. Here we are in February, Black History Month, and
Yeah.
I have a 3-year old that is suddenly like taking a lot more notice to his skin color and how it's different from mom and dad's, and really we're just trying to drive into him, like, that it doesn't matter what color you are, like your skin is beautiful stuff.
Yes.
So but there's my wife and I get different reactions out in public based on if it's both of us with them or if it's just one of us with them, and so
Mhm.
I'm just wondering, what has your experience been with your kids out in public and everything?
Okay. Yeah. So in public, so funny because I have my littlest girls with me, and this was a couple years ago. So she's probably like 5 years old. And it was
Hmm.
during the day. So my other ones may have been at school, I say. But anyway, um, I just got quite a few looks from this one particular guy. I thought he
Hmm.
thought I was single and I had the little girl. And so he kind of followed me around the store a little bit, kind of like, hey, want to go out or something. And other times people do stare, especially when it's me and my husband or out to
Hmm.
eat or whatever, and I can just see it. But as soon as you look at them, they are like, oh, I don't mean to stare, but I'm confused. So, yeah, we haven't
Yeah.
really had any negative anything. It's just a little awkward or maybe confusing for
Yeah.
them.
And is there anything you are doing like for your kids in that? Like, are your kids kind of raising questions about, I mean, sure they understand or
Mhm.
explained adoption to them, but like, is there
Mhm.
anything that you've had to kind of navigate differently as a result
Yeah.
of being a multiracial family?
Yeah. So before, let's see, 2020, we didn't give it much thought at all. Like, um, I really never thought about it. And during 2020, a lot of things came out that I actually just wasn't aware of. The Some of the systemic racism, or
Hmm.
just how Black people may be treated differently than I was. I didn't understand or realize that was going on because it just wasn't shared with me because I have no reason to know until then. Um, I had there's a church service where one of our pastors, who happens to be African American, gave a talk and shared some of his story of maybe profiling. I'm not sure exactly what he would call it, but maybe a little profiling and how he'd gotten pulled over and different things. And so that got me really thinking. And I
Hmm.
reached out to him and his wife, and asked them a few things. What should I teach my kids, or what do I need to instill in them? And so they had some really good advice. Um,
Hmm.
you know, we go to a church that has both Black and white attending. So that's another thing I kind of feel awkward about as they get older, that, where we go, I kind of notice now, are there
Hmm.
other Black people here, and how do they feel?
Yeah.
Um, so, and they're really open about it. We can talk about it, and their hair texture is different, so we have to do a
Yeah.
lot of different methods for that. And it's been a journey to learn how to do, young ladies'
Yeah.
hair. So, yeah, we've talked about it some, and I'm sure as they get older, we'll have even more conversations.
Yeah, that's what we are kind of experiencing too,
Mhm.
and understanding with our kids. And um, my wife works at a church, and it's where we've been going for all this time. But it's a predominantly white congregation. I mean, our two black boys are two of four colored people in our church, and I love a church. I'm not knocking our church or our community by any means, but it's just not very diverse where we are. So we actually just visited a church this past weekend that
Mhm.
is a predominantly white church, a predominantly black church that merged together to have more of that diversity and influence together. And we just absolutely loved it. And we'll be, I'll probably be attending with the boys more often myself
Mhm.
because of my wife working in the church. Um, so she can't really leave our church to go to this other one.
Yeah.
But but it was just definitely a unique experience, and we're just trying to make sure we're integrating more influence and experiences and ideas, and surrounding ourselves with more people because I grew up um, in a city that's a good mix of white and black people, and with a lot of black friends. And even then, like, I would hear some things, some profiling, and some treatments going on, but I didn't think much of it until as we were getting older and it seemed more common,
Mhm.
and then really started hearing and seeing more things. And so it's definitely been a different experience. And now just being more aware of those kind of systems in place, and the fights that are going on. Now it's just kind of worrying for my kids' future, but also doing our best to arm them and prepare them for whatever is to come.
Yeah.
So it's good to get another perspective on that. So
Yeah, exactly. My pastor's wife said that she ran into an interracial couple once and was talking with them. And she said the girl asked her if there's racism or something about that. And she said, "No, I don't think so around here." And that the girl said, "Well, how would you know?" And it's kind of like that.
mm,
I wouldn't know
right,
until I were presented with that situation and these circumstances that we find ourselves in.
yeah. Well, from the number of times that we've mentioned church and you've talked about your church,
Mhm.
obviously you're a believer,
Mhm.
and it seems that you've turned your experience in foster care into an opportunity to help others with coaching that you're doing. How does your coaching of foster parents work?
Well, right now I'm in the very beginning stages,
Okay.
so I don't have a big, huge coaching program that I follow. Basically, we'll have some conversations over the phone or via Zoom, and we can talk about kind of whatever the issues are that you're having. And I can kind of guide you as to, whether this is normal, or whether you should seek this type of therapist, or maybe try this. I had one lady actually from Mexico reach out to me recently regarding her a group home that she is employed with, I think. And she has some issues. I had written an article on reactive attachment disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so at the end of the article, I just put my email there. And so she emailed me, and then we got to talking about those attachment issues. But in Mexico, it's so different because I was telling her, you need an attachment therapist. You need to see the pediatrician. And she's like, that doesn't happen here. They don't
Mm-hmm.
see a doctor here. So I gave her some other strategies that would be just specific for her. I've also kind of coached or just listened to another lady she had like a biological kid, then she had a almost the same age adoptive kid. And so she was torn because she saw the her child she kind of favored, and the foster child she just wanted to unburden herself, I guess, with the feeling that maybe she favored her own child more.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kind of talk them through it and really encourage and explain that these kinds of feelings that you have are normal, and kind of give some maybe examples from my own journey to alleviate some fears for keeping the kids forever,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps, or, so it's very individual coaching. It's not a huge systematic approach.
And how it should be, obviously. I mean,
Yeah.
it's each system and each case, each person, each individual is gonna be different. Their situation will be different. The foster children they have in their home are gonna be different. So
Mhm.
absolutely individualized is a great way to approach it. Is has there been anything that's surprised you so far in your coaching journey? That's kind of stuck out with any of your clients so far? Or, I know it's just beginning, but
Yeah. Actually, I feel like it's not picking up like I thought it would. Like, I think I would have loved someone, just to bounce these ideas off of and get some fresh perspective and just someone maybe to vent to. But
Hmm.
I would have loved that. But maybe it's just not something that other people need, or they just don't know that I'm available, or what. So, and it's just
Yeah.
social media, I guess. So that's pretty much where I am. I don't know
Yeah.
if, you know, I don't know if
No,
that's
and
working out.
yeah, no, and I get that part of it, because I've definitely, and this being my second season of my podcast, I've had individuals reach out to me and that paid attention to my wife and my story on social media, everything, and if and it's you want to give good advice because the goal here is helping children and helping
Mhm.
families, and so you don't want to be like, oh well, yeah, I can share my information for you for a price, like I could,
Right.
like you feel terrible doing that. So it's been more like giving advice and just kind of informing them experience you've had and finding the correlation of turning that into, okay, what does a coaching really look like. It seems like it would start out probably a little dry. Like I agree, there's things that we could have used someone's perspective. A seasoned vet like yourself could use your perspective when we were in the thick of it, 4 or 5 years ago. Because I remember like the first night with our first placements at 1 in the morning, my wife sobbing, "Did we make a mistake?"
Yeah.
And 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 that was all because the 3 week old would not be still enough for us to get his swaddle on him to get
Yeah.
him to calm down. And
Yeah. It's
and
emotionally
once,
overwhelming.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
it is overwhelming. And just the things that go into getting ready, getting comfortable with your placement and letting them communicate to them how you are a safe space, how you are not just trying to take over their lives, how you want them to have happy, healthy lives, that just those kind of things, that making sure that parents know how to do that. Plus, those classes that we go through to get your foster license, foster
Mhm.
certification, they really don't prepare you for everything. They're great. There are a lot of great things you pick up, but I feel like we probably got more from the continuing education classes we got versus what we did for our initial civil service to get licensed. I feel like there's more. Um, if we could have flipped it and had
Mhm.
more of those like actionable things that we're really learning,
Mhm.
um, I think it would have
Yeah.
been more beneficial. So if that's what you're offering, I think talking to someone like you and myself would be a benefit to people just getting into foster care. So,
Yeah, because the training, you really don't know unless you're doing kinship, you already have the kids. You really
hmm
don't know what questions to ask. And so they're
hmm
just kind of on the surface trying to tell you everything they can quickly as possible, or so they can get through so much information. And then after you get the kids, you're like, wow, I wish they would have told me more about X, Y,
yeah,
Z. And so then all these questions come up. So when you have additional trainings, maybe you have the opportunity to talk to someone more specifically about your case or the situation.
yeah, absolutely. Um, You also started a podcast detailing different experiences and points of views having to do with foster care. How's your podcasting experience been so far, and what can you tell us about your podcast that you think would maybe stick out or make it a great resource for people looking to get into foster care?
Okay. Well, it is evolving like everything else. I'm just kind of getting started. So it's evolving. And what I really want it to be is just sharing general information to make foster parents realize that they're not alone, and share some clips of the stories that I've experienced.
Mm-hmm.
so that they have a general idea of this is kind of normal. The first couple of podcasts, I think I did like how to get started, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's kind of evolving into, interviews or more specific topics.
Mm-hmm.
And so hopefully it'll be kind of a well rounded podcast that you can just tune in and learn some snippets of ideas for the kids in your home, like not necessarily discipline strategies, but maybe just practical how to or ideas to think about with foster care and the foster care system.
Mm.
Sometimes we talk about that a little bit.
Um, any like foster care podcasts or books that you've read that you really have kind of transformed your perspective or maybe fed into more of what you're trying to get across as well?
Mhm. Yeah, we both of us talked about the blacks,
Yes,
Justin,
love
Alex.
Justin Alexis.
Oh
Yep.
gosh, I love them. Like I
Yeah.
love that book. I felt like I was right there with them while they were going through, the stuff in their childhood and their teen years. And I just devoured that book, and it made me almost more compassionate toward those children in those situations because
Mm-hmm.
I can hear someone was sexually abused. But
Yeah.
when I read her section of the book, I could feel what
Mm-hmm.
she was feeling. I think, I felt that I
Yeah.
felt it more than
Yeah.
just hearing, well, they were sexually abused when they were young. It made me feel
Yeah.
something. Yeah. And in his experiences with violence in his community, I felt that like it was really good for perspective of maybe when these kids get to be teenagers, they act a certain way because of the things that they've been through. It just made you understand a little bit better um, what they went through, but their story is a lot similar to other children who have to enter the foster care system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I love them. I kind of kept in contact with them since I had Justin on my podcast last season, and they're just such a wonderful couple. Their story is, I mean, just gripping and heart wrenching, but also heart raising. Just to see where they are now with their beautiful daughter and their first children's book getting ready to come out in April. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's just a beautiful, beautiful story of theirs, and a testament to God and the way He works in our lives because they're definitely strong believers and have really just put their faith at the forefront, and which is amazing. Again, reading their story to see how God is so centered in their lives,
Mm-hmm.
given everything they went through. Like you would think a lot of people would probably like turn away from belief and turn away from
Yeah,
God.
they
Like, how
would
could we
curl up
experience
and
that? And
die
it's
is what they would probably do,
yeah.
or just
So
traumatize their children, and it would just keep going. But I feel like they said, "I make this decision. I'm not going to be like that. I'm going to do
right.
this God's way." And so
Yep.
it's just like a miracle.
Yep. So, and lastly,
Mhm.
you have a book coming out soon. What can you tell us about your book that we should be seeing soon?
Okay. So this book is, remember how we just talked a few minutes ago about how your initial training just kind of sprinkles across the surface. It doesn't get really deep
Mm-hmm.
in anything. There are some scenarios, but they're so cheesy almost, I feel like.
Yeah.
So my book would kind of dive deeper into each of the categories of things. For example, the reactive attachment disorder, not only what is it, but reasons that it can exacerbate any attachment issues. Why you should not really move the children unless you have a really valid reason, because you're
Mm.
re-traumatizing them every time they
Yep.
move. So I wanted this book to be realistic in the fact of what you're getting ready to step into. You're getting ready to step into this war or battle, and you need to be prepared. You know, we're supposed to be warriors, and so we need to prepare for our battle. And I feel like the things that I wish I had known before I started. So for over 10 years, I've been collecting these thoughts and, I don't know, thoughts into my head, and about what I would have wanted to know beforehand. And so I
Mm.
just compiled like discipline. I mean, excuse me, like discipline. They tell you about discipline for like your toddler, you know, a minute per age or whatever the thing is. But is timeout really effective? And is
Right.
it going to work on a 13-year-old? Like, no, you have to have so many tools in your toolbox that you can
Yeah.
pull from, that they don't have time to, you know, explain all the different
Mm.
methods that you could utilize. Um, and then I have a whole chapter on loss.
Mm.
And it's one of my favorite chapters because I actually took scenarios from people that I knew, well, kind of their acquaintances, from foster parents who had children, uh, I want to say ripped away from them,
Mm.
as foster parents. So it was traumatic for them because in some instances they didn't get to say goodbye. In some other
Mm.
instances, they had 3 hours, you know, to pack up the kids so they could move somewhere else. And so it was just, you know, gut wrenching to read
Yeah.
and understand that this could happen. Like they could make this decision to move the child, put the child
Mm-hmm.
back with their family. You don't have time to prepare. And then how would you, if you could, prepare the child for this move,
Mm.
without speaking negatively about the system or whatever? So
Yeah.
that's really my one of my favorite chapters because I have real life scenarios
Mm.
that I found.
Yeah, that's definitely one that would I know would hit me. I'm a softie. I'm definitely a emotional guy. And when our first placement, when they were going back to their biological family, I had to work that night. I was working in personal training at a gym, and it was probably the best thing for me that I was working that night because it distracted me. I said goodbye to them before they left, um, and then as a personal trainer, I got to kick a bunch of people's butts that night and make
Mhm.
them pay for my heartbreak. So,
Mhm.
sorry to those people, but
Mhm.
it, but and that still is something that sticks with me. So I can imagine that loss is something that those people, those stories that they felt because you know you often don't get to stay in touch with the kids that you once fostered. It's usually up to the family. And unfortunately, we did not. We left the family our information stuff, and we haven't heard from them. We heard from their caseworker once when we were doing a visit with our now adopted son a few months later, and heard that things were going well, but
Mm.
haven't
Such a relief.
heard or
That's such
seen
a
since.
relief.
And it
Yeah.
so that was definitely a relief. But also thinking about that they where they are in age compared to our two boys, and
Mhm.
then going places like one of the kids in my son's preschool class has the same name as our first
Yeah.
foster daughter, and it's like no, that's not her. That's not her.
Yeah.
So it's
What's weird
definitely
for us is birthdays. We still are like, oh, this is so and so's birthday. You know,
yeah.
remember when we had the party for so you know?
Oh
So
yeah.
it sticks with you forever. It's just like, you know.
Yep. Yep. So, um, So, how was that experience writing your book? Would you approach it differently next time if you're to write a follow up book, like maybe a book on adoption, since you adopted 5 of your placements that you had? How would you approach it differently?
Um, I don't I don't know that I could approach it differently because I'm just really I just I took an outline, I did a
Hmm.
brainstorm, I did an outline, and then I just wrote. So I really
Hmm.
don't know any other way to write, I guess. But I really would have like hired an editor earlier and, been doing one chapter at a time and like maybe perfecting that chapter before going on to all these other thoughts that I have. So
Hmm.
I might have done one chapter and perfected it almost before moving on to another topic. But I have all these topics like that I want to tell people about. So I want to
Yeah.
write everything down, and it may not have been the best approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you still wrote a book. So, what can I
Yeah.
say? I haven't wrote a book.
Coming out.
So, what's the name of the book and when is the release date for it?
Yeah, it's called to foster. So
Okay.
I named it that because I feel like I had this calling, and
Mm,
like you probably felt this calling, and so I really feel like it's a calling. If it's not a calling, it'll kind of be short lived, and
mm,
you'll be miserable.
yeah.
Um, and I do not know exactly when the release date is. I'm still working out some timeline issues. But if you're interested in the book, they can go to my website, which is
Okay.
kristenadkins.com, and
Okay.
there's just a place to sign up.
Awesome.
Yep.
Great. Well, Kristen, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and sharing your knowledge with us. And I just really enjoyed talking with you about
Mhm.
everything. And just congratulations on your family, on the coaching, on the podcast, and your book when it does come out. Just thrilled for you, and just thrilled to have you part of the family of Family by Heart. So thank you
Yeah.
so much, and
Oh,
wish you the best going forward.
thank you. It's an honor to be here, and it was a fun experience. Thank you.
Well, good. Well, thank you. And for
Mhm.
everyone else, definitely be on the lookout for Called to Foster. Again, you can go to her website. I'll put that address in the show notes, but it is kristenadkins.com. And remember, it doesn't matter what your background is, where you come from, who your family is now. We're born into our names, but we're all family here. This is Family by Heart. Till next time.